You're listening to the Mark Bradford Alchemy for Life podcast.
The outside of a police car, not the inside, just to be clear. Hey there, welcome back. Attitude is everything. That's one of the many phrases that we have heard repeated so many times it's turned into a cliche and it's lost all of its meaning, even though it really does have meaning. I'm sure you've heard that phrase or even seen it in a sticker in a police car. So today I want to talk about attitude is everything, but specifically to consuming media and even more specific to consuming and reading books. As you probably know, I released my 9th book, which is The Devil's in the Details, and it is a novella fiction. I had a very interesting experience with it, and I thought I would because of the subject matter. It's not my typical fiction. I guess having just written the trilogy, I guess I only have one typical fiction, which was the epic fiction. And this one was a bit different. When I publish a book, of course, I hope that I have good reviews. I'd love to have all good reviews, although I would find that a little bit suspicious if I had all 5 stars. But the really interesting thing about the reviews for The Devil's in the Details was that even the negative reviews were good. And they were sort of how I had hoped they would be. For example, there were at least 2 people who read the book, and due to its subject matter, which was sort of religious in nature, at least had some undertones, they were people who had very strong beliefs, and they found that the book sort of countered them. The book, being a fiction, still they found it a little disturbing. And yet they went on to compliment the story, the plot, the writing, the characters, even though they had a problem with it. They rated it like 3 stars, which is perfectly fine. And I really appreciated and applauded the fact that they had an open mind enough to say, look, this is not my kind of story. I even felt a little weird reading this, but, it's well written. And I really appreciate that. And so I'll get back to saying attitude is everything. It was their attitude. And another framing of attitude is perspective. They had the perspective of a reader. And I think the perspective of a reader is such that they appreciate the effort an author puts into something. And on top of that, the book was put out, at least the book that they read, the electronic book that they read, and some of you listening to this may have done the same. It was what's commonly referred to as an ARC, an advanced reader copy, which means it may or may not have made its way to the editor. It may be a little bit rough, it may not be, but it may not exactly be ready for prime time, but it's ready enough for you to sink your teeth into it and hopefully enjoy it. So all of the readers went into this with that attitude, except for one. So I received a review on it that was less than stellar. And again, I'm perfectly fine with that. But the review I received was from someone who sort of read it from a different perspective with a different attitude. It was the attitude of someone who fancied themselves an author. So therefore, they looked at it as an author. And the critique they gave was as an author. Although I must say in my defense, they missed the mark. They quite didn't understand the nuances and the whole gist of the story. One of the complaints was the length. I mean, it's a novella, so by its very definition, it cannot get so deep. It's only 165 pages versus the 390 or the 410 or whatever the last ones were. It's a stark contrast between the people who reviewed it, even the people who you could say didn't like it, and that review, because you could clearly see that all the other reviews were from the perspective or attitude of someone who is a reader. I think that really shows with movies and things like that as well, that when we go to watch a movie, we go to the movie from the perspective of being someone who wants to consume the movie. We want to, suspend our belief. We want to be entertained for a couple hours. And sometimes the movie's not so great. Sometimes there are pieces and parts of the movie that we disagree with or that aren't executed that well. But we eat our popcorn and we're like, okay, entertain me. And I think that's the attitude of people who say, I'm giving you my money, please entertain me. Now, hopefully they are entertained. But that's different than the attitude of someone who is perhaps considering themselves a critic. And that's why critic reviews and audience reviews sometimes differ so greatly. In fact, there's a lot of hubbub in the last couple of years about Rotten Tomatoes and how you'll see a movie that'll get absolutely fantastic critic scores. But then the audience, the Joe Schlub, the me and you people, the commoners who go watch the movie, we're like, well, no, we didn't really like that. Or vice versa. And without getting too deep into it, sometimes there's literally political undertones to that sort of thing. And that's unfortunate. But putting all that aside, the eyes of a critic and the eyes of a consumer sometimes are different. Getting back to seeing the attitude is everything sticker on the outside of the police car, and again, I want to specify outside. I've never really seen the inside of one. If you're pulled over with the attitude of the officers just doing their job, I may have done something wrong, even though I don't think I did something wrong, let's just get through this as quickly as possible and as respectfully, it probably will go differently than if you have the attitude of these people don't know what they're doing, they're power mad, they're hungry, Now, is the person with the proper attitude or the attitude of someone who just wants to get through this, are they going to admit to doing something wrong when they didn't? No, and nor should they. Nor should someone who reviews a book or reads a book that doesn't enjoy it, nor should they say they enjoyed it. But there's also a way to do something and there's a way not to do something. Because the person with the other kind of attitude can actually create more problems for themselves. As I said in the beginning, attitude is everything. Just like so many other phrases have been said so many times to you that they lose their meaning. It's a powerful statement that we all just take for granted. Well, attitude is everything. Okay, great. Life still sucks, or this bad thing happened to me, or I'm still going to suffer, right? So I would say to you to perhaps at the very beginning, at the very least, as I do with all of my podcasts, is have an awareness. I think it's really important to have an awareness of the attitude that you have. And sometimes it takes a little bit of reflection before going into a situation. I mean, countless people have been saved an amazing amount of stress because they were mindful of the attitude they had before they went into a potentially stressful situation. And to reference my book, The Three Voices, this is one of the really useful things you can do with your second voice, the voice in your head, that you talking to yourself, the inner monologue, the inner dialogue, in that you actually can practice. You actually can place something out in your brain and say, well, how would this go if I'm this way? Okay, all right, I probably should be a bit understanding in this situation. I should probably be very professional in this situation. In this situation, I should have some extra empathy for this person, and so forth. I'm sure new parents can relate to this because once they're not new parents, they get it. They get how to handle things. They get how they actually can exacerbate a situation with their child by meeting that child's angry, negative energy with more negative energy or more excitement. It's just like when you have a dog, when the dog is jumping and jumping and jumping and jumping on you. That's not when you give it attention, because you're saying, hey, I'm rewarding you for doing something bad. But you don't learn those things until you're immersed in them and you're like, wow, that did not go well, or that's not the right way to do that. So once you're mindful of your attitude, you actually can change it. And again, I am as sensitive to this kind of thing as you are, and maybe even more so, even though it's part of what I do to help people in this way, is that if someone gives me some kind of catchphrase like, well, da-da-da-da-da, I'm the first person to say, yeah, sure. Okay, great. That's exactly how life works. And I have a podcast about the meaningless positivity that's shoved down your throat and how that doesn't do anything and how you have to back that up with something. So in this situation, I'm saying the same thing with attitude. So having said all that, thank you if you did review the book. Thank you for reading the book, even if it wasn't your cup of tea. I appreciate all of you. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I will talk to you again. Thank you for listening. I love your feedback as always. Keep it coming. I always appreciate if you like, share, subscribe, and all that nonsense. And if you don't, that's cool too.